Dear ladies and gentlemen, this is 11 o'clock, so we have waiting 5 more minutes as it used to be in the academic sphere. And right now we would like to open the first Ferenc Farkas International Scientific Conference. My name is Peter Fodor and I'm going to lead you through to this event. First of all, let me have the words of greetings. Welcome of the patrons and the special guests. Let me welcome József Bódis, Director of the University of Pécs and the President of the Hungarian Rectors Conference. Zoltán Sepp, the Dean of the Faculty of Business and Economics. Iván Béjác, the Hungarian Patron of the Conference, member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Ákos Jarjabka, the head of the Department of the Leadership and Organizational Sciences. And Gert Hofstede, the international patron of the conference, honorary doctor of the University of Pécs. Professor Hofstede will be not present physically, but he will be present virtually. And I have to tell you that he is going to be 90 years old this year. And from this position, we wish a good health and further success, both in family and both in science. Thank you very much. And also, I would like to greet Zsolt Páva, the mayor of City of Pécs. This is the time also of the welcoming of the keynote speaker at the plenary part, Gyula Bakacsi, the president of the section of Economics and Law at the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. Balázs Heydrich, director of the Budapest Business School. Feldman Paulo, the associate professor at the University of São Paulo. I have to tell you that unfortunately Zoltán Dubéci, the Secretary General of Hungarian Rectors Conference, cannot be present, so there's a minor change in the plenary program, but we will organize it. And the last greeting verse are for the patrons, the supporters and the sponsors of our conference, the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, clapping. The Cultura Economica Foundation at the University of Pécs Faculty of Business and Economics, the Hungarian Rectors Conference, the University of Pécs Faculty of Business and Economics, and the Diaspora Project Network. After the greetings and the welcomings, I would like to kindly ask our special guests and patrons to open the conference. And first of all, Professor József Bódis, please tell your opening speech.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, dear colleagues. On behalf of the University of Pécs and in the name of all university citizens, I would like to cordially welcome all of you on the first international conference, which is held in memory of our former professor, Ferenc Farkas. My special welcome to our distinguished guests from abroad, and for this reason, let me allow to say some words about our university. Distinguished guests, we are very proud of the history of our university, which was founded in 1367, which was founded by the famous Hungarian King Anjou Louis the Great, and this foundation was supported by the Papal decree. Our university was among the first 4 universities in the Central European region after Prague, Krakow and Vienna. The modern University of Pécs was established in 2000 through the merger of the former universities, Medical University of Pécs, János Pannonius University and Teacher Training College of Szekszárd. Today we have 10 faculties. We have about 20,000 students. Among them we have more than 4,000 international students who came from more than 100 countries all over the world. We have 1,500 teaching staff, and I have to mention that we have 22 doctoral schools. I can say that we can provide education program to students almost all the field of sciences except of agriculture. As I have mentioned, this conference is dedicated to the memory of Professor Farkas, who served our university, who served the university life, who served the university idea and conceptions with his whole life. He served it as teacher, as the leader of the institute, as the dean of the faculty, and last but not at least, as the vice rector of the university. On behalf of the university, I like to express my many thanks for that work, for his whole life. And I'm sure that this occasion, this conference, means an excellent occasion to contribute for his professional life. Thank you for your kind attention.
And now, please, Zoltán Sepp, tell your words.
Ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, magnificent rector, I warmly welcome all of you here on the Faculty of Business and Economics of University page to the occasion of this memorial conference on our former professor Ferenc Farkas, who was unfortunately died 1.5 years ago. We have here a really rich heritage of his work, so I do think, and which part of this heritage has, I mean, it is worth to take now into account and draw some lessons of it. I'm really happy that so many colleagues and friends are taking part on this conference and paying their tribute to our former professor. And I think one of the core messages and lessons of his life was that management is not just simply a profession, it's a little bit more. To manage organizations, to manage processes, to manage changes, but before all, to manage people. That was essentially his life, and he was trying to integrate throughout the work, the job of teaching students at university, to make research and to internationalize the whole network, which is nowadays really an important and core part of our institutional capital. So I think he was one of his most important thought was that to create and continuously develop, improve the quality of governance at all level. I don't mean that the government in Budapest, I mean at all level, at the level of a department or a faculty, university and so on, is a huge part of the word creating process, and I think he spent his whole professional life to accumulate capital in that field. Please give me the opportunity to tell you some words on the hosting faculty, which is now led by me. So we are really happy to have you here oil as gas, and the faculty is, you had heard how many sponsors this event has, but our faculty is the main sponsor, and I do think that that is a right solution for that case. I think that the faculty, and absolutely in line with that what the whole university plans in these years, is strengthening the efforts to internationalization. If I wouldn't be there, I had to be in Copenhagen, where some of my colleagues are now on a conference from the European Foundation of Management Development. By them, some international accreditation is forgiving, and we are planning in 2 years, in 2020, to have a so-called EPAS accreditation. I think that would be a really nice point in time after 50 years of educating in the field of economics and business to have that quality improvement, and this could also contribute to the process by which today the university has some 4,000 students from abroad. Our faculty has programs since more than 20 years on English language, bachelor, master, and PhD programs, and we also do have nowadays more than 300 students from so many countries. Professor Farkas was also the man. His idea was to start with an English language doctoral program, and it was among the pioneers in our country, and I think today it contributes to that, that we are able to compete on international level. So what I do have to tell you, I have to thank all to the organizers. They prepared that event, especially to the Department of Leadership and Organizational Sciences. And I have just one message to you. Please make use of the opportunities here of this scientific event and have just lots of fun. Thank you very much.
Professor Schepp, thank you very much for your opening thoughts. And right now I would like to ask Ivan Beac, the Hungarian patron of the conference, the member of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, to tell his opening speech.
Rektor úr, dékán úr, tisztelt vendégek és megjelentek. Az ember személyes és társadalmi időben élő lény. A jelen különös képződmény. Szakadatlanul a múltba hull, és egyidejűleg szüntelenül jövővé válik. Írja Pataki Ferenc a Varázsát vesztett jövő című tanulmányában. E mai tudományos konferencián Farkas Ferenc élő gondolatai és azok az értelmezések, elemzések hangzanak el, amelyek felidézik múlttá vált személyiségét, emberi arcát, a jelennek és a jövőnek megőrződő, megőrzendő tudományos munkásságát. Ebben a különleges pillanatban, amikor rá emlékezünk, egyszerre van jelen a múlt, a jelen és a jövő. Az ő személyes múltja találkozik a mi személyes jelenünkkel, miközben egyéni létével a jövőbe érkezett, melynek titkát már megismerte, ha megismerte. E szavakkal köszöntöm a konferencia előadóit és hallgatóit. Honored Professor Bodish, Professor Sheb, honored audience. A human being lives in personal and social time. The present is a strange phenomenon. It falls continuously into the past, and at the same time it becomes the future incessantly. Ferenc Pataki writes in his essay titled The Future That Lost Its Magic. Today's conference will hear the living ideas of Ferenc Farkas and the interpretations and analyses that evoke his past personality, his human character, and his professional work to be treasured for the present and the future. In this special moment when we remember him, the past, present, and the future are here at the same time. His personal past meets our personal present, while he had already arrived into the future that secret he knows by this time. I would like to greet the presenters and the audience of this conference with this thought. Thank you for your attention.
Professor Bejác, thank you very much for your thoughts. And right now, it's the time for Professor Ákos Jarjabka, the head of the Department of Leadership and Organizational Sciences, to tell his opening speech.
Thank you, magnificent Rector, Bodish, Dean Shep, presidents, patrons, professors, colleagues, dear guests, ladies and gentlemen. The idea of our international scientific conference was conceived by the community of the Department of the Leadership and Organizational Sciences of the Faculty of Business and Economics of the University of Pécs, when we lost our leading professor Ferenc Farkas in October 2016. We knew that a leader, lecturer, mentor, and manager of this greatness can be left unnoticed. So we have organized a memorial conference with professors of Hungarian universities in 2017 in honor of Professor Farkas, and then we created the Ferenc Farkas Award and scholarship for young lecturers and for students who follow the spirit of Professor Farkas. But the most important element was still missing: organizing a scientific event that creates a long-term, sustainable tradition where the scholars and young researchers from all over the world can meet and exchange ideas the way Professor Farkas aimed to. I'm so glad to be here, and I'm so proud of announcing that our efforts have been successful and brought this international scientific forum to life with prominent representatives. And such an interest, we hope, for not at first. Now the number of guests at this first time event is more than 80 from 14 countries. Let me express my sincere thanks to Dean Shep and the Hungarian Rectors Conference and the Hungarian Academy of Science as well. And additionally, the editorial staff, Journal of Vezetéstudomány Budapest Management Review, that they accepted our vision with their patronage, and special thanks to Professor Hofstede for his virtual presence as a patron in the conference. Let these days be the festivities of science every year. Thank you so much.
Professor Jarjabka, thank you very much for your opening thoughts. And right now, this is time to shift a little bit from the physical presence to the virtual part, as Gerd Hofstede's presentation is following. And I kindly ask the members of the committee to take a seat in the first line. And I would like to ask the technical staff to help me to get Professor Hofstede in connection. And, oh, sorry. It's a little bit louder. And in the meanwhile, we have this help. Let me also entertain you a little bit, just to fill up the time. And because when I was preparing my speech to this part of the conference, I was thinking like what for us as students Professor Farkas means. And I think what it means was really to deal with talents, to help young students to go and foster. And I think the number of the participants and also the people who are sitting here is pretty much symbolizing his strengths and values. And let me call the attention on one very simple thing. In the first line, we can see Agnes Kühnel, the honorary doctor of our faculty, and the network that they are built up with Professor Farkas, the number of the publications that they did is just, this is really a leading sign for us students. I hope, and I can say in the name of the youngsters of the Institute, that we try to follow this presence, this current presence of Ferenc Farkas in our further job. The past, the present, and the future is currently here. Thank you very much.
Dear audience, nearly 10 years ago, on 15th October 2009, I attended a conference at this university on culture of business, capital of culture. Simultaneously, 3 colleagues, one from Hungary, one from Italy, and one from the USA, and I received the honorary doctorate in economics. On a picture, I still preserve, all 4 stand on picture ropes on either side to our Ferenc Farkas. Next day, I gave my talk on business goals for the world order. I had retired Maastricht University in the Netherlands in 1923. And among other adventures, I had been a visiting professor at Hong Kong University, China. My talk in 2009 page referred to the questionnaire I had developed in 1998 and followed by Hong Kong Business Administration students, evening students with day jobs, about the relative importance of their own business needs of 15 goals. I presume that MBA students were better informed about the real goals of the leaders and the leaders themselves, who, if asked, would be likely to produce more wishful thinking. I presented the outcome of this experiment at an international conference in Korea, and to my happy surprise, a number of colleagues from different countries asked for a copy of our questionnaire to use it with their own students. Within 6 months, I got their results from 17 countries, and they had the material for an article on business goals for a new world order, which showed a variety of goals perceived by evening MBA students with day jobs in business among these 17 countries around 1999. Across countries, dominant goals were growth, continuity, short-term profits, and personal wealth. Goal profiles differed among countries, however. When the business world went through the crisis of 2008, the most affected countries were the USA and others most stressing short-term profits and personal wealth. Least affected were China and Germany, stressing respecting ethical norms and responsibility towards society. One of the countries participating was Hungary, with the middle position. And besides the Hungarian results in 1999, I had recent data from a study in Page in 2009. So my talk about business goals for a new world order had a solid local research base. You are now entering a conference on management and leadership in the 21st century, and the subject business goals is still as current as in 2009. I wish you an inspiring conference.
Professor, unfortunately our microphone was turned off, so you haven't heard the great clapping and the... So one more time, and thank you very much for your speech. Please stay in touch and you will be able to hear the plenary session too. Dear ladies and gentlemen, right now we are moving to the plenary session of our conference after the opening speeches, and I would like to kindly ask Gyula Bakacsi, the President of the Committee of Business and Administration, so the Law and the Economic Departments of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, to hold his lecture, to hold his presentation about charismatic and neo-charismatic leadership. Professor, please.
Distinguished audience, let me start with some subjective thoughts. This is a conference dedicated to Professor Ferenc Farkas. It is an honor to be part of that. He left us an extremely rich academic heritage, and I'm convinced that we do have responsibility and obligation to keep, maintain, and cultivate that academic heritage. I'd like to join to the thoughts of Professor Vegleges, and let me quote one of my master, Professor Sándor Kovács, who said that the past is not behind us but below us. We do not pass the past, but we stand on the top of it. We need to understand that all of us are standing on the shoulders of giants, and Professor Ferenc Farkas was one of them. The conference has a numbering first conference, which suggests that it will be developed into a series of conferences, and it will become a tradition. I'm convinced that his name is the best brand for that series of conferences, and describe and present the challenges of the 21st century and help us to find the right answers. And now, turning toward the topic, and the last word about him, I believe that he was charismatic. Okay. And now, charisma, neo-charisma. I believe that charisma is one of the intangibles, let me put this way, one of the intangibles of the social science and business and management. The word and the notion itself comes from the Christian vocabulary, meaning divinely inspired gift. And it was Max Weber in his pivotal book who changed the meaning of charisma and approached it toward the social sciences, introduced it as a way of the authority, and he transferred it from theology to sociology. At least that's the conclusion of Professor Bass. Max Weber emphasized in his work that charisma is a kind of response to higher order needs beyond everyday economic demands. And let me just refer the summary of Trice and Bayer, who said that, and this is pretty close to the original Christian notion, charismatic leader had extraordinary gifts. It's a very interesting approach that it is related to emerging situation of crisis. And followers were attracted, it is again close to the Christianity, followers are attracted to the leader by a belief in transcendental powers, and the leader's gifts and transcendence were validated in the repeated experience of success. So it is based upon continuous success. The authority, Weber introduced the whole charisma as a type of authority. This authority anyway stems not from the position, it stems from the person. As Nia referred, under charismatic authority, followers obey because of the power of the person. So we obey practically to somebody, to the charismatic leader. Anyway, we have a dilemma about this, and the dilemma itself is that whether it is power or leadership. Is it obedience or it is followership? Obedience is based on dependence, followership is rather based on transaction logic, mutual dependence, and the rewards after this meet intrinsic needs. This dilemma is real. Certain features of charisma reminds us to the obedient-like phenomena. Other aspects remind us rather to the followership. In everyday sense, it is often read as an attribute of personality. However, and this is the thoughts of Sai and his author, it is rather a leverage impact on the followers. The quotation says, the actual attributes of charismatic leaders are ignored in favor of their effect on the followers. As I put earlier, it was Max Weber who turned and changed the meaning of charisma from theology to sociology. The neo-charismatic notion, anyway, was another turn from the sociological, political understanding, the authority notion. It was turned rather toward as an organizational phenomena and as a psychological behavioral aspect. So really, this is now leadership. I would refer to two pioneers of this emerging leadership understanding of charisma. One of them is Robert House. In his early works, he referred to the charismatic leader as change agent. This idea comes through, and it is developed into a full theory in the works of John Cutter at Harvard. House described the change agent by dominance, self-confidence, need for influence, strong conviction in moral righteousness. This is what is termed in the work of Burns as moral agent. In House's thoughts, charismatic leader take calculated risk. He or she is pretty much achievement-oriented and readily takes responsibility. And referring to McClelland's theory, neo-charismatic leader has a strong need for achievement and power, not necessarily for affiliation. That's what House says, because it depends on the perception of the followers whether to accept this change agency or not. The other pioneer is McGregor Burns, who introduced the transformational leadership beside the transactional, referring the transformational as moral agent, as heroic, and he closely related the transformational leadership to the charismatic notion. And he introduced a very, very strong message saying that leaders and followers, in the case of transformational leader, charismatic leader, raise one another to higher level of motivation and morality. And in this role, the leader is focused on the entire personality of the follower. Now, finding a new angle to discuss the charismatic, neo-charismatic phenomena, I try to approach this whole stuff from the perspective of the followers. First, I'd like to refer to the Argyris theory of followers or people maturity, developing from the infantry, from childhood to the adult maturity. Following of that, and I would like to repeat, it is just printed, the 7 elements of the maturity. The more the followers develop from immature to the mature personality, or in other words, they move from the task execution in an organizational environment to self-standing problem solvers, to become self-standing problem solvers. So the leaders develop from the traditional Weberian charismatic leadership to the neo-charismatic, and they change the control mechanism from behavioral to achievement, or rather even the clan control. The second pillar of the follower's perspective is discussed in a quite interesting paper of Podolny, Kurana, and Besharov. They approached the leadership idea from the angle of meaning and sense-making. There are 2 quotations from them. Almost by definition, they say, the phenomenon of charismatic leadership implies that followers come to perceive their action as coupled to valued aspect of their life. The second quotation, the close relationship between charismatic leadership and meaning, sense-making, is rooted in the fact that both are concerned with the contribution and the reproduction of social order that is inherently valued by the individual. So from the sense-making point of view, the value system, belief system, in broader sense, culture, is one of the key elements of the understanding. And now if we translate this to the two types of charisma, the traditional Weberian charismatic leader is committed to the person, the follower of him, committed to the person of the leader and superordinate her, I mean the leader, above self. So this is a bottom-up hierarchical relationship between the two. The follower is devoted to the leader, perceiving her problem-solving capabilities, so that's IQ, beyond the one of his own. The follower is ready to follow, accepting both the goals and the way of realization of the leader. Both followership and acceptance and obedience, unconditional subordination is there. And as a consequence, by the follower, the leader is perceived as personifying everything that the follower cannot be or cannot become. In the case of the neo-charismatic leader's follower, the follower is rather committed to the vision, values, and core beliefs of the leader that is opening space to the follower's self-actualization. The follower, due to the problem-solving capabilities of him, they are mutually dependent, I mean the leader and the follower, on each other, and their relationship is rather coordinated than sub and superordinated. Followership based on a win-win gains and leaders developing intelligence, so it is rather emotional intelligence that IQ. And as a conclusion, the leader is perceived by the follower as personifying perspectives the follower cannot visualize. So that's the contribution. This is just a repetition of the sense-making to the understanding of charisma and charismatic leadership. And this is a summarizing table. I shouldn't necessarily go through every single box of the table. Approaching from conceptual focus, from the perspective of role perception of the leader-follower relationship, and the follower's characteristics, the two is fundamentally different. And now some research-based data about the charismatic leadership. From now on, I will refer the research of Global Leadership and Organizational Behavior Effectiveness, that was initiated by Professor House, whom I referred earlier. He was the father of this whole program. And in their famous book, which is just presented in the top right corner, one of the leadership variables, it's a composite variable, it is defined as reflecting ability to inspire, to motivate, and to expect high performance outcomes from others based on firmly held core values. That's the definition of the monograph. If we just follow the words of this definition, it is absolutely clear that the Globe's approach is neo-charismatic in any sense. Anyway, this variable is broken into 6 subscales or first-level variables: visionary, inspirational, self-sacrifice, integrity, decisive, performance-oriented. This variable, I mean charismatic value-based, was found, and I will show you the data behind that, as universally endorsed as contributing to outstanding leadership. This is vis-a-vis to certain other leadership variables that are more culturally bound, and much more differences occur in cross-cultural comparison. There are two criteria for this universally endorsed status. 95% of the societal averages had to exceed the mean of 5 on the 1 to 7 scale. And the second criteria, that worldwide grand mean score, including 62 cultures together, had to exceed 6 on the very same 1 to 7 scale. Having now some data for that, this is the map of culture clusters of Globe. Globe identified 10 cultural clusters. The coloring will show you the different clusters on the map. The black, anyway, is the terra incognita, so Globe has no data on those countries. If we now compare the charismatic profile of those culture clusters, the picture is the following. Here is the profile of the Anglo cluster, the Germany cluster, the Nordic cluster, Latin Europe, Eastern Europe, Latin America, Confucian Asia, Southern Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the 10th will be dropped on the top of that. That's the Arabic culture. There was room only for 9. Anyway, if we make some comparison and just a quick first glance analysis, it seems that the top scores in almost any respects goes to the Anglo culture. The charismatic phenomena itself is somewhat Anglo-Saxon. The top scoring variables are circulated. There are two exceptions here. One is interesting when it comes to Eastern Europe, that this decisive is absolutely a draw with the Anglos, so we are together highest scoring. And the second goes to the Nordic. Integrity is even higher in expectation toward the leaders in that culture. Interestingly enough, the low-scoring culture is pretty much similar, so one single culture attracts most of the low scores, and that's the Arabic. We have now one exception here, and interestingly, that goes again to the Nordic. Self-sacrificing is not too much expected in the Nordic Scandinavian environment. This is now the world grand mean of the 6 first-order variables and the composite charismatic value-based. Going back to this universally endorsed, I would say that 2 composites are non-universals. That's the self-sacrifice and the decisive. And the major second-order variable is, I would say, almost. So Globe interpret as it is universal, and we have a 0.09 difference to the grand mean of 6. I would say also accept as being universally endorsed. And the last slide of my presentations is a comparison of the world grand mean and the Hungarian. I would say that as in Pest, we would say it's not bad. So the Hungarian profile is pretty much aligned to the world average. I think we have a lot to do with that, but I think it's a good basis. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Professor Bakacsi, for your excellent thoughts. And right now I would like to ask Balázs Heydrich, the rector of the Budapest Business School, to tell his plenary speech. The title of the speech is "The Landscape is Changing, a Mixed Method Study of Small Words in Higher Education."
Dear distinguished guests, professors, ladies and gentlemen, I have a mixed identity standing here and talking about a change of an organization from the point of a researcher and also from the point of the person who is supposedly responsible for the leadership of that university. It sounds like an easy task, but from the academic point of view, it's not so good being in and out of the problem at the same time. One of the conclusions, which I can already tell you, that most of my colleagues, the academic staff, is also in a mixed identity now, in the move, or at least in the division of how much we are teachers and how much we are researchers. But all this dilemma boils down to the simple fact that this organization, Budapest Business School, at this point is very much in the middle of a change process. So while I'm the most honored, apart from other common reasons, that I can have this keynote speech today, because I don't and cannot think about a better place in Hungary to talk about a change in an organization than at the University of Pécs, where the whole school of change management research was established by Professor Farkas. And I also would like to, well, argue or say, but it's more of a wishful say, that though formally I've never been a student of Professor Farkas, but informally, for most of my time as a young researcher, I considered myself as an informal student, and I hope he accepted me like that. These are my partners in crime, in the paper and the research. Karina is actually here. This will be the structure. For many of you, the Hungarian colleagues, the environmental aspect will not be revolutionary, that you all know about Hungarian higher education. Maybe the perspective of Budapest Business School, how we see and understand and try to react, that could be interesting. And when we come down to the research side, that what is our understanding of organizational culture, and especially subcultures, and what is the role of subcultures in a change process in a higher education institute. And for that one, as in case of most cultural studies, we choose not only to do a longitudinal quantitative study, but last year, based on the results of the quantitative study, we did and started to do a qualitative study as well. For those of you who are less aware of the history of our school, Budapest Business School, and culturally, of course, that's a very important information, that some 18 years ago it used to be 3 different schools. Even 5-6 years ago you could very easily see the traces of that. Now less and less, but geographically and sometimes mentally that's still in people's mind. One governmental decision which heavily influenced business education in Hungary was in 2012, where business education was, so to say, highly dispreferred financially, which changed the complete Hungarian landscape of higher education in business. In other fields as well, but now we are talking about business. Another state decision which strongly influenced at least our school as well is the decision that over the age of 62 you have to decide whether you retire or teach. Out of the 4 schools or faculties of our university, at one, where at that time I used to be the dean, out of the 33 people who were infected by this regulation, 32 decided to retire. This is some 90, whatever you can tell, but that's a cultural change when almost all your colleagues over 62 retire. And the strong leadership and especially governance issue when all universities from 2013 are working with a so-called dual leadership, which is also very much a mixed idea, not all the time, especially on the everyday level, is not all that clear. I'm not going into details about the school itself. You see the basic profile. And one notion which probably not all of you are aware, we have these 4 faculties, 3 in Budapest, one in Zalaegerszeg, which is very much the western side of Hungary. What we are very good at, one of our strengths, is turning former Soviet army barracks into campuses. These 2. So these are the places where we have the largest infrastructure with the least students. The other 2, which are very much downtown, are more condensed and having 6,000 and 5,000 students here. We have 500 here, 3,500 or so. And now talking about the change process, even as a model, you can have all the theoretical approaches that in what ways you're starting a change. Well, one first good step is always to change the strategy, and then of course you come to the other sides of the organization. From 2016 we have a new strategy which still our colleagues try to believe that we think seriously. I guess that's the same with the external world, that when we created the strategy, we created with the purpose that on every Tuesday and on every Wednesday, whatever decision we make, we have the strategy in our mind. The more we do it, the more I have the feeling that the most challenging part of the strategy to say no to different initiatives which are absolutely doesn't fit to the original strategy of the school. One thing which I like to draw attention on is that I guess in Hungary we are the flag holders of, and proudly we are the flag holders of creating the very category of what University of Applied Sciences means. So we explicitly keep on saying that we are a University of Applied Sciences, and even our research is very much linked to this idea. And one initiative which we think we are also quite ahead of the Hungarian or Central European higher education sphere, that we have a rather comprehensive system of creating a sustainable university together with students and teachers and stuff. These are the different possible different understandings of culture in higher education. In my study, I mainly deal with these three. However, you will see that we will not distinguish the faculties as different subcultures, and even the empirical results had got not much signs that the faculties themselves are different subcultures. The subcultures were divided by something different values. So as a theoretical basis, we used Martin's ideas on understanding cultures and subcultures. The first, which is the mainstream, especially in the 80s, 90s in cultural studies, which consider organizational culture as an integrated unit. From a business perspective, that's a much simpler and easier understanding. But I think at any university you're working at with different sciences and disciplines, even within a faculty, you don't really have this idea that people have the same values. And our university, in a way, is also a strange creature, because if you take it simple, all we deal is business, so we are all from the same discipline. Well, just come to our school and you will see how different we are between the different faculties. From an outside point of view, we look like an integrated whole, but it's a more exciting word in there, believe me. So what we agreed on, what we took as a research perspective, that the pluralist one, that it's a differentiated one, not a fragmented one, because it's more of a chaotic perspective, but something which at the end of the day can come together, but you always acknowledge the differences between these cultures. For those of you who has got a visionary mindset, this is more the idea we are following. So what we did is we did a longitudinal study in 2011 and 16. The Cameron-Quinn framework we use, but I will tell you more about that. And as most cultural studies, we checked what people wish, so what's the espoused values, where would they like to see their university, and that's the should be question, and the how it is now, that's the perception part. So, and it's always interesting to see the gap between what people think and what they see as happening. So we use the organizational culture assessment instrument, which honestly it's a rather simple, and statistically as a primary data you cannot expect much. Therefore we used for the identification of subcultures the method which coincidentally was first used by Professor Hofstede in 91, when he tried to identify subcultures with a hierarchical cluster analysis, so based on the values. And the qualitative study which followed was called the vignette method, where we used 7 short cases, and the focus groups discussed those short cases which we recorded and then coded. That's the model for the quantitative study, which many of you might know. That's the competing values framework. Of course, there's no clear-cut cultures in this one, but it says that 4 competing values are working as a tension in any organization, and it takes you and moves you to different directions based on the values. I don't think I have to explain in a management conference what a hierarchy culture would mean. The market culture is more of an externally focused culture, which is more reacting to the market needs. Adhocracy is, of course, again very external focused, less regulated and defined by rules. And clan, as we just heard also from Professor Bakaci, is rather internally focused and more based on values and exceptions, less on rules. With the vignette method, what we have done is that out of the second run of our quantitative survey, we asked the participants a year later who are the ones who are willing to or volunteer to participate in focus groups. Then they refilled, for those people who refilled the questionnaire, and consciously in one focus group we had always people from the same subculture, but they were not aware that they are from the same subculture with same values. Just the major results in the paper you see more on the quantitative study. These are the values, so that's the should be idea of our colleagues. Academics and staff mixed, so all. For the first one, we had something like 930 people who filled out. And if you remember the slides on the environment, that's before the landscape of Hungarian business education has changed. It's a year before the storm. That's what you see here. From the management perspective, it's positive to see that at that point in time, in number, our largest subculture group was market focused. At least to me, that's a positive sign, that people were not so much introverted in their own small academic world, but more externally focused. Very strong at that time was clan, so the more cohesive group idea worked. This one we could easily identify. There was an extremely strong clan, which later on I recognized that was the faculty. I was the dean at that time, so it's very good to be a dean at a faculty which is strong clan. On one hand, it's good. So culture-wise, it's good. Otherwise, it's not always. And we had two hierarchy subcultures. This one was clearly staff, non-academics, who were actually even wishing more hierarchy than which was present, which gives them stability in their decisions. So that's 2011. When I told you that the method of OCIA is a rather simple one, then we got the results of the 2016 survey. We were shocked because on the surface, as an overall results, were hardly any difference between the ones 5 years before. So it seemed that nothing has changed. But of course, when we dig down to the subcultures, then the change was quite big. What you can easily see from here, and bear with me with all the changes which happened within and especially outside the university, a very strong need for clan emerged, even more which was there before. Mainly from the staff, there were more need for hierarchy, which is basically that we would need good answers from the rules and regulations which we don't know. And the ones who mainly try to survive is that we cannot have rules for everything, is that they wish for autocracy. But these two numbers indicates a rather strong change from an externally focused market to a very internally focused clan values. And from the qualitative sample, where we had 3 focus groups, they turned out to be market because from that smaller sample we managed to have a market, subculture, a slight clan and a strong clan. And that's when we did, especially with Karina's help, the focus interviews, where we had 7 cases all related to higher education within the university, with student affairs and other things. On the value side, one hand, most teachers clearly reject the idea of being evaluated by the students. Interestingly, the clan seems to be also customer-oriented. They're not market, but they're customer-oriented. That in case of students, they are rather flexible with the rules. So the discretion, and even we had a strong difference between full-time and part-time students, at least in the mind of the colleagues. That we do have rules, and at times they do apply, and other times they not necessarily. Which in a way that's a customer orientation, because they all have the positive attitude to students. That's here. What they perceive now, and I'm coming to the end, and that's very much a typical reaction to change process, that whatever support you provide is not enough. They're very often not even aware that there is support. And here we can easily see the expectations are not clear either for the organization from the outside world, and also not clear within the organization what is the role of a teacher in 2018 at Budapest Business School. So this tradition versus new culture is very much there now in our situation. Even the title of my presentation, and honestly the title of all the presentation I've done in the last 15 years, always refer to one pop song or rock song. That one was from Depeche Mode. The Landscape is Changing. It's an early 80s album. So even in the conclusions I try to use titles of rock songs. So what you see on the should be level, on the values level, there's a strong need for clan. That's good news for any management. And most people do not want to see themselves as a strong hierarchy, which basically comes from the lack of autonomy which we are heading into. There's an identity crisis for quite many of our teachers. Also, there's a divide, a non-easy divide between our rules and the customer orientation. Most rules will not necessarily support our orientation. And I cannot give you an exact fluctuation rate because it's not easy. But bear in mind that all what I have said, and that seems like the culture on the overall level hardly changed, 630 colleagues has left within this 5-year period. I mean, it could be that the same people arrived and left in sometimes 2 months, sometimes 2 years. That's the vast majority is non-academic, though. But with that change of human resources, the culture is still there of, in a way, the older days, so we, of course, still in the change process. So I can just hope that whatever I also learned from the basic ideas of change management, mainly from Professor Farkas, would help me at the end, that whatever strategy we figured out would succeed and the culture would not eat strategy, as Professor Drucker has said. Thank you very much.
Professor Heydrich, thank you very much for your great thoughts. It's a little bit shocked me and amazed, but the things that came to my mind, that the song you were mentioning is continuing, that we are family, I got all my sisters with me, and our goals inside, and we don't get depressed. So probably it's towards the direction of the goals and the strategy as well. Yeah. So thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And right now I would like to ask Paulo Feldman, the Associate Professor of the University of Sao Paulo, to hold his lecture on geopolitics and internationalization strategies.
Well, let me thank you. I need to thank all the organizators, and especially for Professor Ákos for the invitation. And I need to say that it's a great honor for me to be here. I'm a Brazilian professor, but I am Hungarian descendant. So my father and my mother, both, they were born in Budapest. And I'm trying to get my Hungarian citizenship. Thank you. I hope that until the end of this year, I will get my Hungarian citizenship. So, depend on my fluence on the Hungarian, but I'm learning. Well, the subject that we will discuss today, it's a very important subject, and I need to congratulate the organizer also because of the choosing of the subject. There is some technical problem here. Okay. I think that I also need to congratulate the organizers for the fact that they choose this subject, because this is a real, very important subject, especially for the future of business administration. Geopolitics is a very important subject, but the relation between geopolitics and enterprises and companies is something that has not been studied. Only few books, very few publications about. You can find something relating geopolitics to economics, but it's very difficult to relate geopolitics to the companies. And I intend to show you that this relation is fundamental, and I'm sure that in the future, in the near future, this subject will be one of the most important subjects in the business administration field. There is a mutual dependency between geopolitics and companies. Geopolitics is highly affected by corporations, but for the corporations, they are totally dependent on geopolitical issues. So the relation is total. Now, geopolitics is totally affected by what the companies do. And this is something recent. I will show you very soon that when geopolitics was initially created 100 years ago, companies were not important. So in that period, the geopolitics deals only with countries. But now, companies are so important as countries. And should companies understand geopolitics? Yes, it's fundamental. And we have an issue here, because all the companies, almost all the companies in the world, in Hungary, they are very dedicated to internationalization. And they made a lot of studies to internationalize themselves. They try to understand the market where they want to go. They try to understand the customers. They try to understand the government of the countries where they intend to go. But they never understand the geopolitics of the region where they want to go, where they want to implement a strategy. So that's the point. The companies, they should understand geopolitics in order to establish a well-fitted strategy. Geopolitics it's one of the most important factors for a company that wants to go to another region or another country. The fact is that it's very complicated to understand geopolitics. The geopolitical facts, they are very difficult to forecast. For example, 3 years ago, it was impossible to forecast that Great Britain would leave the European community, the Brexit. Something totally unexpected, but totally important for the companies. The same as the election of Donald Trump. It was almost impossible to consider that a person like Donald Trump would be elected as the President of the United States. 3 years ago, nobody believed in that possibility. But so now Donald Trump is the President, and there was a lot of changes, not only in the US, but also in the rest of the world. And so the companies, they needed to change their strategy. They are changing now because of the new situation in the United States as the new president. You know McKinsey? McKinsey is one of the most important consulting companies in the world. And they say that the geopolitical uncertainty is one of the most important factors when you need to take an important decision in your company. So the corporate decisions are totally dependent on uncertainty of geopolitics. Well, now I start to mention these authors, which are the most important authors that we have in this subject that I'm presenting to you. So Steve Berendt and Parag Khanna, they have been studying this relation between geopolitics and the corporations for more than 10 years. And they had written many publications and many books, and they are sure that the companies that failed in the recent years, that the companies that failed in their process of internationalization, they failed because they haven't understood well the geopolitical shocks, the geopolitical factors. So in their research, geopolitical risk is the most important factor to establish a good international strategy. Let me tell you about the old definition of geopolitics. This is the old definition. The old definition of geopolitics, it has around 100 years. In the beginning of the 20th century, people started to study geopolitics, and so this definition has more than 100 years, and it was a multidisciplinary field of knowledge that was based on politics and geography theory especially, and humanities and social science. Notice that all of them apply to explain the relation of international power between the states and nations. So this was the main factor to study relation of power between nations. This was the main reason for geopolitics on the beginning. And notice that there was no mention about companies, no mention. The old objective of geopolitics, the old objective, understand and explain international conflicts and the major political issues. So to understand the conflicts and the most important international political issues. Again, the word company, the word enterprise, the word firms, does not appear. So no relation with companies. But this has 100 years. So what happened during the 70s? During the 70s, many important aspects happened in the world. One of the most important was the end of Cold War. The Cold War was something very important, especially for you here in Hungary, in the Eastern Europe, but it was an important geopolitical modification that affected companies. And so for the first time, people started to study relation between geopolitics and companies. Just after the end of the communism in the 1990, a guy called Luttwak published a very important book called From Geopolitics to Geoeconomics. And he proclaimed the importance of the trade commerce. And he had a very famous phrase where he said that the logic of war is embodied in trade commerce. So geopolitics started to change the focus from war to focus on trade commerce. So Luttwak was the guy who made this movement. Michael Porter was also an important author because he wrote a very important book. Probably many of you know the book, The Advantage of Competitive Nations, a very important book published in 1993, where he mentioned that for a country to be powerful, the most important fact is the companies that country has. And for example, he said, United States was the most important country in the world in that time because 30% of the largest companies in the world, they were American companies. Japan, Germany, and other countries, they were important not because they have some armaments or ballistic power or bomb or atomic bomb, but they were powerful because they have important multinational companies. So this is the contribution of Michael Porter. The new geopolitics today, what we consider geopolitics today? Well, no longer the states is the main actor. Now, the main actor are the multinational companies. Multinational companies, international organizations, they are the most important actors of geopolitics today. And sure, there are many other factors that are important, like energy, technology, environment, climate change. But the fact is that now we include companies as one of the most important actors in the field of geopolitics. Again, with my favorite authors, Berendt and Paracana, they say that the companies become larger, and also there are some other aspects that affect the companies. When the companies go outside, especially when they go to other countries, they are noticed by everybody, and sometimes they need to protect their facilities because they are vulnerable to, for example, terrorist attacks. And the terrorist attacks was something important that created many approaches for the companies to actuate in other countries. But when they study what they needed to protect in their facilities, the companies started to understand the geopolitics aspects of that country. So because there is a relation between safety of the companies, safety of the facilities, and the geopolitical, the turbulence of the countries. Maybe the most important contribution for the relation between geopolitics and companies was given by the Chinese. It's very interesting what happened in China. In 1990, the Chinese leaders they realized that one of the most important aspects of the world at that time was the intense movement of the large multinationals around the world. So the multinationals in that period, they were looking for countries to go. All the multinationals, especially Americans, but the Japanese, Germany, Brazilians, Hungarians, they were moving their installations around the world. They were internationalizing themselves. And the China government noticed that it was very important to implement some measures to attract these multinational companies. And what they did was to follow recommendations of Deng Xiaoping, one of the most important Chinese leaders, that this started the revolution in China, started the opening of the Chinese economy, and especially he created attractiveness for the multinational companies. One of the, probably the most important fact about the growth of China is the fact that they were able to attract the most important multinationals of the world to China, not only because of the cheap labor costs, but because many other aspects offered by the Chinese government. And so China suddenly became a country where all the important companies of the world were located. And this was one of the key factors for the explosion of China. So the relation between geopolitics and companies are totally intense in this case. But there are some risks, obvious. There are many risks in the geopolitical questions. Political and regulatory risks have a strong impact on business. And so the companies, they need to pay attention to these risks. That's the point. For the companies, it's very difficult to pay attention to the geopolitical risks because they don't live in that country, they don't have too many specialists in that country, and so it's very difficult for companies to forecast what could happen in another country. But this should be done, and now it's possible to be done. The companies, they must be able to prepare for the change, and they need to know that many important facts affect the business scenario and consequently will affect them. I mentioned some facts for you. For example, the election of Donald Trump, the Brexit, the tension in the China Sea, the tension in Turkey, many problems in Latin America, in my region, South America, especially because of the situation of Venezuela, of oil. We have many problems with the oil suppliers in the world. All of these aspects, they have a great influence in the economical scenario, but also in the decisions that the company need to take. Each country is different from the other. That's a problem. So a company needs to understand that when the company intends to have activities in another country, it's mandatory to understand that other country. But to understand a country is not only to understand market or to understand the consumer, but you need to understand also the history of the country, you need to understand the culture of the country, many other aspects, not only the economical aspects. And especially the historical factors, they have a great influence on what could happen in countries, in different countries. The fact is that the traditional approach to business strategy is does not include historical analysis. This is a problem. History of countries is so important that something that the most modern countries are considering is that they are hiring specialists in history. So this is very interesting because companies normally, they have business administrators, economists, people that have studied business or economics, and people that have concluded their MBA. Yes, sure, these people, they are really very important. But now, the companies need to have people that understand the history of the countries. If you go to a country, you need to go understand the history of that country in order to forecast what could happen in the future of that country, especially in the political situation of that country. So history now is one of the important aspects that need to be understood by the companies. Historians and geographers also, they are a profession that it's very important for a company that intend to go to another region. But what happens is that companies are not used to hire historians and geographers, but this is something that need to be changed. So, talking about the risks of globalization, what are the most important risks faced by companies that intend to globalize? The governance. Governance of countries are totally different. So, governments are different in each country. Each country has a different kind of government. So, and you can try to use a standard definition for government. When you say government of Hungary, it's totally different from government of Brazil, for example, or of United States. So this is something that needs to be very well understood by companies. What the role of the governments? What are the non-governmental activities, institutions? What are the non-profit organizations in that country, and which role they have? And, very important, technology. How is the approach of that country related to technology? The country is a country dedicated to technology and innovation, or the country does not pay attention to technology. There are a lot of engineers. It's easy to find engineers. What are the approach of the country related to intellectual property, for example? So, it's important to understand the many aspects related to technology. So, following again Paracana and Stephen Barrett, they say that there are 7 important risks for a company that intend to go outside, and they are geopolitical risks. If you want to go to a country, you need to understand the market, sure, and especially if the market is or not unstable. You need to distribute your personnel around the world, and so you need to know the risks of having employees in geopolitical complicated countries. So if you intend to move your employees to a complicated country, you need to consider, it's important to be clear to you that this is a risk that you are considering, and especially a risk for your employees. Your headquarters could suffer some terrorist attack, for example. So it's another point. Supply chain and partnership, market volatility, information vulnerability, and technology, as I mentioned before. This is another very important book, probably one of the most important books about the relation between companies and geopolitics, and especially about strategy and geopolitics. The name of the book is Geopolitics, Strategy and Geopolitics. The author is Professor Mike Rosenberg. He is an American professor, but he teaches in Spain. He's a professor of the IE University in Spain. And this book is a very good book about our subject. And he has an important approach where he says that supply chain is the most important aspect that need to be understood for a company when this company goes to another region. So, and all the companies, they need to pay attention for the geopolitical risks that will affect its global chain, its supply chain. Supply chain, so in the opinion of Mike Rosenberg, is something mandatory in terms of the companies, and so the relation of strategy and geopolitics is more mentioned or more involved in the supply chain. Supply chain is the most affected aspect of companies when you consider geopolitics. I will give you some examples. On the beginning, geopolitics, the relation of geopolitics and strategy was something considered, especially in few sectors. But the sectors that started to consider geopolitics, they were oil sector, because the oil companies, they operate in very risky regions. So for them, it was mandatory to understand the risks, especially because companies related to oil, they have a great relation with the Arab countries, where the geopolitical risks are very high. But also airline companies, they are used to deal with geopolitical and unstable geopolitical situations, because they need to travel around the world, and so they need to be aware of the geopolitical risks of countries around the world. But now, this was on the beginning. Now, geopolitics is something important for all the companies, because all the companies, they have supply chain spread around the world. So you need to know the possibility of a shortage of raw material, a possibility that you will need to reduce your consumption because there will be a riot in that country, or there will be an important political modification. So supply chain is the most related aspect with geopolitics inside the companies. And something very interesting to finish. 20 years ago, when we consider geopolitics, we considered only underdeveloped countries, emerging countries, and in regions like Africa, Latin America, and South Asia. But now, you need to understand the geopolitical situation of even the very developed countries. Look what happened to United States and to United Kingdom. So they are very developed countries that suffered a big modification, a big geopolitical modification. So the companies needed to be aware about these aspects. So this is to finish my presentation. So thank you very much. It's a great pleasure.
Professor Feldman, thank you very much for your thoughts. and in the last 1 hour you have seen some snapshots of the quality and the variety of the papers that came to the conference, and you will be able to find full of the documents and full of the papers in your bag on a flash disk. So when you're interested, you can read all the Polarized sections documentary. And we also decided to make Best Paper Award, which you could apply for, and right now this is the time to give the Best Paper Award, which will be published in the Budapest Management Review later. And I would like to kindly ask the widow of Ferenc Farkas and our former associate professor, Farkas Ferencné Zsuzsa, and the head of our department, Ákos Jarjabka, to give the awards for the participants. Please come over. And I will call the winners of the Best Paper Award, and I would like to kindly ask the authors to come and take the certificate for this. László Gyula and Sipos Norbert, and the title was Do We Need Interest Reconciliation? A cím magyarul Kell-e nekünk érdekegyeztetés? Bencsik Andrea, Machova Renata, Juhász Tímea and Csókás Lilla, Leader versus Ethics, Characteristics of Behaviors of Ethical Leaders. A cím magyarul Vezető líder versus etika, avagy az etikus líderi magatartás jellemzői. Balogh Gábor és Karolini Mártonné, International Comparison of HR Focuses Caused by Aging Population. A korosodó népesség HR fókuszokat módosító hatásai nemzetközi összehasonlításban. Stefan Kühnel and Marina Müller, Using e-learning for knowledge acquisition in audit companies. Németh Julianna, Vitai Zsuzsanna, Shards from the Glass Ceiling, an attempt of fear recreation. Szilánkok az üvegplafonról, elméletalkotási kísérlet. Bányai Edith, Sipos Norbert, Actualities in the Leadership Excellence. Aktualitások a felsővezetői kiválóság területén. A díjat a díjazottak később fogják átvenni. Kicsit úgy, the award will be given later to the nominees. Borgoly Ágnes és Balogh Gábor, Communication of Industrial Clusters. Ipari klaszterek kommunikációja. Szabó Bálint Brigitta, The Employee Success and the Supporting Organizational Career Management Tools. A munkavállalói siker és az elérését támogató szervezeti karriermenedzsment eszközök. Professor Jarjabka, Professor Farkasné, thank you very much. And my last duty in the plenary session is to call your attention on the further program points. Right now, I would like to ask everybody to come over and to make a group picture for the conference. Then we are going to have a lunch from 1:30 till 3 o'clock. And from 3 o'clock to 17 o'clock, so 5 p.m., there is going to be the parallel sessions. You can find the program leaflet in your bag, so you will be able to check out the rooms and also the maps of the building where you need to go or where you wish to go. After the parallel sessions at 17:30, so 5:30, we're going to have a gala dinner, a banquet here in the building at the 3rd floor. And we also involved a small cultural program for the attendants. There will be a classical guitar and violin duo performing by Klára Akiko Nakazawa, Gergő Skibo, and Csaba Szűk. So it's not a duo, it's a trio. Sorry. This is the program, the rest of the program for today, and now I would like to kindly ask you to move forward, stay in front of the line here. Ákos is the symbol where you need to stand, and we would be happy to make a group picture with the participants of the conference. Megkérem önöket, hogy legyenek kedvesek előre fáradni egy közös fotó elkészítésének az erejéig. Thank you very much, and right now the best part of the day, that the lunch hopefully is served at the third floor at 323. Thank you very much for your attention.